particular session, which is Being You is Your Best Business, we're focusing on the question of how can you leverage your personal identity to launch and develop your professional career, and providing us with an opportunity to accomplish this objective are distinguished alums, and we're very excited and grateful and proud to have a group of alums here with us today at NACB to share their experiences with us. And you know, the format of this session is Q&A. It's conversational, it's participative, and so after introducing each of the alums, I'll start off by asking a few questions. But while I'm asking these questions, I'd like everyone in the audience to think of one question that they would like to ask, or at least one question, which you'll have the opportunity to ask during the second half of this session. And so, you know, just before we begin, before we actually had the idea for this specific session, we brainstormed about opportunities to engage with the community at large. And one of the things that we discussed was how to engage with alums. And so I'm so grateful that Regina and Russ Howland, Regina Izmaylova are here tonight with us. And I have to say, for all the panelists, I asked if they could share their bios with me in advance. And I was so impressed by all the bios that I saw. And you know, I had very high expectations, but they were really exceeded. And so thank you to you both as well. And I'll introduce Regina and Wes. If and when Sharlene and Kristen make it through the snow, I'll introduce them as they come in as well. Regina Izmaylova. Regina came to the U.S. in 2001 from Russia without speaking a word of English. And by 2002, she had learned some English and was able to start her bachelor's degree and got a work-study job for $8 an hour in community college, where she was able to study for free. And 2002 is just fairly recently, it's just about a decade ago. And in 2006, she graduated with a finance degree and landed her first real job in private banking as a financial analyst. In 2009, she gave birth to her daughter, who's 5 years old now, and she thought to herself, having a full-time job, no family to help, and a 2-month-old baby, that it would be impossible to get a graduate degree. But then she thought to herself, if not now, then when? Which I think is a wonderful attitude to have. Better at least to try. And she mentioned NACB made it so convenient to study, and when people asked her about how did she do it, how did she pull it off, and maybe they should try, she always replied, if I can do it, then you can do it, which again is, I think, a wonderful quote and a wonderful attitude to have. And in 2012, she graduated with a master's in finance, and currently she has a position as a director of finance for one of the largest medical centers in the greater Boston area, and this is her American dream story. And I just find that just so impressive. You know, my own parents came to the United States in the 1970s, and they didn't speak a word of English either. They were fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and that's so difficult to do to succeed in a country where you're not native to that language. So that's extremely impressive. Wes Howland, seated to my left, is VP Director at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. He's been in enterprise risk management at the bank since 2010, and he's currently responsible for operational compliance and model risk management, board of directors risk reporting, and risk assessments. And he has over 30 years of experience in banking and mortgage banking, and his professional roles have taken him from upstate New York to Iowa to Texas and finally Boston. So Wes and I were discussing before this session started that he used to live in upstate New York, so he's used to the snow. And I suppose you're used to the snow everywhere except Texas.
Well, interestingly enough, when we lived there, there was a one day when they got 12 inches of snow in Dallas, Texas.
And my
wife,
Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, my wife and I think we're cursed because wherever we go, we bring bad weather with us. So maybe you're cursed now. I don't know.
I think that's a made-up story because I've heard it before.
No.
So his background, in addition to risk management, includes roles in corporate finance, credit policy, mortgage servicing, contract negotiations, business development, and client relationship management. He has an undergraduate degree in economics and received just last year his graduate degree in business ethics and compliance from NECB. And he and his wife are empty nesters now, living in Quincy, Massachusetts. And they have 3 sons, 2 living in Iowa and 1 finishing his graduate studies at the New School for Social Research in Manhattan. And one of the things that I found very interesting about all the bios that I received is that they, I asked for bios generally, but everyone talked about their families. Everyone talked about their kids or their spouses or their parents. And so I think that it's a real testament that to succeed in education in your professional life, you not only need to have a lot of willpower yourself, but you also need to have the support of loved ones. So as I mentioned, I'll get things started by asking a few questions, but then I'll ask if people in the audience can raise their hands and ask questions. My first question is a general one. I guess I'll start with you, Wes, and then move on to you, Regina, for this first question. And this is, tell me about your educational and professional journey. What led you to the industry that you're in today? What made you, interested in finance or banking? In all seriousness, I remember when I was growing up, I'll admit finance and banking wasn't the first. They weren't the first occupations that people think of when they grow up. I mean, you hear about firefighter or police officer. No one talks about banking and finance, and no one talks about college administrator.
Well, it's not what I wanted to do when I was younger. I actually wanted to be a phys ed coach. I played a lot of sports. I was decent at them. But at the time, I was advised against it because there weren't that many teaching jobs. So this goes back to the mid to late 70s. And then I don't know what prompted me to go for economics, to tell you the truth, because I certainly didn't study it at all when I was a kid. I think it was I didn't know what I wanted to do. The place where I got accepted me, for which I was grateful. And so it was just like, well, I guess I could go there since they accepted me and figure out what I want to do. And to tell you the truth, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
What led you to eventually go into the banking industry?
I knew somebody who offered me a job. Is really what it came down to.
Right.
It was a fellow alum from where I graduated. I think he was 2 years ahead of me. He had a job at a thrift in upstate New York and said, hey, I've got this analyst position, you want it? I was looking for a job. I said, sure.
And what's kept you?
Well, it's interesting because I've been in kind of financial services all my career, but I've purposefully taken different roles because I'm no longer in corporate finance.
Right.
I get bored after a while and I want new challenges, and so I purposefully move and change, either with the organization I'm at, or I leave, and go to Iowa and work for a completely different company, or Texas. I need the challenge of learning something new, which I think has hurt me in certain regards because I'm not an expert in anything. And I think today a lot of companies are looking for experts. They want people to apply what they know and to do it well.
Well, I think your employer would dispute that you're not an expert in it.
Well, I had no risk experience before I went to the Federal Home Bank of Boston. Fortunately, I knew the chief risk officer. He and I worked together a long time ago, and he knew I had, I guess, talent.
You must have had some qualifications, though, that led him to believe that other than being your best friend.
Yeah,
You would
I
actually
wouldn't
be
call him
very
my best
young.
friend, but he and I, we had respect for each other, and we knew we had each had capabilities. And to tell you, that's what I look for when I hire people. I don't care if they are sound technicians at the job. I look more for capability and whether.
And so what made you decide to start with the Invite program?
So I was in the mortgage business, and I had kind of a front row seat to the meltdown. The business I was involved in, we were servicing loans for other companies, and many of those companies were Wall Street firms. And so they would buy all these loans, they'd send them to us, and we would service them. Take their customer calls, make the payments, process payments, and do all that stuff. And then all of a sudden the market started heaving, and delinquency rates started going up. And our clients at the Wall Street firms would call us and say, "What are you guys doing? You're not servicing these loans right." And we said, "No, we're doing what you're paying us to do." And then all of a sudden, it just crashes, and the business model was kind of shot. And it made me think about business ethics. And I was actually thinking about going back to school. I was thinking of a law degree, and then that was kind of too expensive. I couldn't justify that from an economics program or perspective. And then I learned about the business ethics and compliance program.
Which is such a unique program.
Yeah, and fortunately for me, my employer basically paid for the whole thing. I could do it actually off work hours and sometimes during work hours. But it was
during the mornings.
But it was the
nights,
subject
yeah.
matter of the ethics, because it was just the whole mortgage meltdown. I think to me was just an ethical transgression on the part of a lot of players in the business, and it was.
Right.
And then I had a personal episode where a company, some guy who owned a company he was stealing money from it. He got caught. And the ramifications were that federal regulators came in, took everything away from him, in addition to a restaurant that he owned that two of my kids worked at. And so because this guy was unethical, my two kids suffer. And so it just got me interested in it and how people
That's fascinating.
make these decisions and affect other people without really seeming to care too much about it.
If I may interrupt, actually, it's interesting because I work for State Street Bank, and this afternoon, actually, at noon, we had a TED conference with Mr. Carter, who used to be the CEO of State Street Bank, and part of the things he mentioned touched on ethics, and the way he put it practically is like this. Back then, you either didn't have the right metrics, or the challenge was that you had the right metrics, but you still took the wrong, unethical decisions. So it was either one way or the other. And in a way, I think that kind of offered the way out to many people who took the wrong decisions back then.
Regina, I'll let you jump into the conversation. Can you tell us about your educational and professional journey? What led you to the industry that you're in today?
Well, I guess for me it was easier because I remember when I first came to downtown Boston, I saw a big financial district where probably mostly the banks, and I used to be.
Sorry, when did you come to Boston again?
I came in 2001. Yes. Those people looked very busy and very successful. So I thought, okay, this is the way to go. And I used to be very good in math, so it was kind of 2 + 2, So I knew that I wanted to do something with mathematics, also, and finance was the right way to go, especially in the Boston. So that gave me kind of start to go with finances.
Right.
I mean, now I started my career in banking. Then I went to kind of also banking, but more on the private side. And now I actually work in the medical industry, which is
Right.
totally different.
Well, you mentioned that you started off with, well, first of all, you started off not speaking much English.
No, I didn't speak at all.
And your first job was $8 an hour, and so to rise so rapidly is very interesting. I
Yeah.
think. I mean, aside from studying hard and doing well in your courses, what else did you do in the way? Like, how did you actually make the leap from your $8 an hour position to your next position, for example?
Studying hard, not partying much in the house. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And,
Did you go to networking events? Did you?
no, I started this job that I had was
Right.
actually a job in financial aid office, and I had a funny story with it that I didn't speak a word of English, but I went in kind of college like this. I didn't know that it was college, and I needed a job. And I remember I'm seeing there's an office and there are people there, so I come in, and I don't know, you call it fate or I don't know. There was a Russian lady who came up to me and she's looking at me and she's saying, "Do you need a job?" So I guess that's kind of was my first step in kind of seeing, I mean, I was doing just the data entry and working with people and doing some financial stuff on the other end, but working with the students mostly. But it definitely gave me a first look into college. I started, learn the language, and I started to think more about finance career. So that gave me kind of a push in this direction.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an impressive journey.
Yeah. now it's students. Now I probably wouldn't do it. When you're young, you have a lot of energy.
You can only go through your journey once, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's a good thing. So to my right, at the beginning of this session, I mentioned that we are in the middle of yet another snowstorm, and it takes like an hour to move through one block. It's kind of amazing. But I said that as people came in, I would introduce them, and we have another illustrious alum to my right here, Kristen von Hoffman.
Hi everyone. Sorry I'm late.
And Kristen, I'm going to share your bio with everyone. Kristen von Hoffman was hired in November 2010 to be the Cambridge Public School District's first sustainability manager. In this role, she founded the school district's Office for Sustainability, which is housed in the Facilities Department. Kristen has lived in the Boston area for almost a decade and moved here a few weeks after graduating from Yale University. In 2014, Kristen completed her Master of Finance degree from NECB and currently serves on the Master of Finance Advisory Committee here at NECB. In May 2010, she was invited by the United Nations Association to contribute as an ambassador to the Transformative Education Forum at the UN in Geneva, Switzerland. And most recently, Kristen has served as the secretary for the Green Cambridge Board and ran for Cambridge City Council in 2013. That's where I've seen your name before. I've seen your name before somewhere. And Kristen currently lives on the North Shore with her fiance and their dog, Penny. I know that dog got a name, but not your fiance. What's your fiance's name? I'll let you say it for the cat.
John.
John. Her fiance, John. And
Minor oversight.
and Kristen enjoys cooking.
Let's just set your
exercising.
priorities straight.
Exactly, yeah. So, Kristen, we're just getting started, and we just are touching upon the first question, which is, as you heard, could you tell everyone about your educational and professional journey, what led you to the field, to the industry that you're in today?
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. So my path has been somewhat winding, but the general themes of my career so far have been education, policy, and sustainability, and in different combinations. And the reason that I sought out a Master's of Finance was because I felt that it could be very supplementary to all the different kinds of work that I do. So the Master's of Finance program was so great. I absolutely loved my experience with NECB. And everywhere I go, I spread the word about what it's like to get an online degree and what it's like to be a student specifically here at NECB. So I can't speak highly enough about the program. it's really helped my career to have the Master in Finance, because I find that the financial component of sustainability becomes more and more relevant every day. So what I mean by that in plain terms is saving money, let's say in a building or on a building project, energy efficiency is really a huge financial benefit. And whenever I'm trying to put a project forward to administrators, I always bring in the financial and capital funding piece. And so a financial degree really has helped me in that regard. I think it's also useful, for personal finances. It's useful in so many different ways. So that's what led me here, and that's a little bit of background on my career.
And how did you tie that with the political component? Because that's what I found fascinating about your bio, right? You were very interested in finance, but you tied this into a position at the city of Cambridge, and you also ran for city council. How does that piece meld in?
Sure, absolutely. I guess on a personal note, one of my goals is to see more women run for office, so politics is important to me in that regard. I ran for city council. I did really well, but unfortunately I lost in a field of 25 candidates competing for 2 open spots, so it was pretty grueling.
Well, this is your first time.
It was my first time, yeah. But having the financial degree for that was important because, as you can imagine, in municipal politics and really any level of politics, understanding how a budget works, understanding, municipal bonds, all kinds of different financial components about how to fund a project is really important. So I felt like it was a valuable degree in a policy way as well.
So Kristen, I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to ask you, I guess, my second question, and I'm going to go to Regina and Wes. So, the topic of this session this evening is leveraging your own personal identity to launch and advance your professional career. What's one thing that you think made you special, that made you stand out at the beginning of your career? How did you use it to help you launch your career? Because I think that when you talk about an interest in finance, that's an interest that a lot of people have, but there was something that probably made you distinctive or special in a way that made you actually stand out. Oh, and sorry.
Sharlene's in charge.
Oh, Sharlene is here. Yay. Well, I'll let you answer that question, Kristen.
Sure. So your question is what made me stand out, or what do I think is special about myself? I would say the word authenticity is, what comes to mind, but I actually don't think that any one person is better than another. My particular sort of angle on my career and on this degree and so forth has just been really carving out a sense of authenticity and trying to convey that to people, whether it was when I was knocking doors as a city councilor or when I'm talking within a group when I was doing my degree and typing weekly responses and homework online. It's just trying to be myself and bring that self and that personal story to the table. So, my story, like I said, has been somewhat winding, but every single one of you have a unique story and history and life. And just being able to figure out how to communicate that, I think, is what's most important. And everyone has their own version of authenticity and, what you bring to the table, but everyone's story is valuable.
I think that's so true. That's such a wise thing to say, I think.
Thanks.
So I think, now that our panel is complete, I'm going to introduce Sharlene Malcolm. And Sharlene, I'll ask you the same question that I asked Kristen after I introduce you. And Sharlene, I mentioned at the beginning of the session that it takes like an hour just to get through a block of snow. Or a block on the street, and I think we have had 72 inches of snow in the last 30 days, something like that, which is pretty crazy here in the Boston area. But I wanted also to talk about Sharlene. Your bio also very, very much impressed me. Sharlene is the Director of Retail and Business Development at Canton Cooperative Bank. She has extensive experience in various areas of banking, such as retail banking, business banking, auditing, operations, and lending, coaching, and managing. In her previous role, Sharlene managed a team of 8 at a high-volume call center and virtual banking center, and she successfully trained and coached her team to success. Sharlene also maintains active involvement in several community service organizations, including the United Way of Mass Bay and Interfaith Social Services of Quincy. Sharlene is a fellow recipient with the Partnership Inc. Mentor Program and a Community Award recipient of the Black Achievers Inc., both of Boston, Massachusetts. Sharlene has one son who is in college pursuing a career in animal medicine, and that's in keeping with the theme all the panelists talked about, their families as well. Sharlene has earned a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's degree in business compliance and ethics, both from New England College of Business. She is currently working on her doctorate in business administration with a concentration in leadership at Walden University. And Sharlene, you're proof that we need a doctorate here.
I begged many times.
that way it could have been NECB, NECB. Instead we lost you to Walden. But so, Sharlene, we're so grateful and thankful to have you here with us this evening. As you heard me tell Kristen, the topic of this session is leveraging your own personal identity to launch and advance in your professional career. And so the question is, what's one thing that made you special, that made you stand out either at the very beginning or towards the beginning of your career? How did you use that special thing to help you launch your?
It's funny, as I came in, and I apologize for being late, it's ridiculous. I've driven around downtown Boston a number of times tonight. But as I was sitting in back, I heard Kristen mention she was being authentic. My whole career, my personal and professional life, being authentic goes so far. With my professional relationships, being authentic and transparent as much as possible is priceless, because if you're able to speak to the people that are on your team and let them understand what your vision is, what your company's vision is, that goes a long way. And I started in banking in late 1980s, and I've seen that particular skill and that characteristic in many people go really far. I know your first frame of thought is probably, okay, well, I can't be who I am because, maybe that's not good enough, or maybe that's not what they want.
What do you think keeps people from being who they are? Because I've also had that experience in my own career. People, so I'm an attorney by background, and a lot of the time when I was working in a law firm, people would always praise the quality of my work, but say I was a little too nice. And even though that was intrinsic to my personality, that was a hard thing for people to accept. So.
I can completely relate to you, because in my role as a coach and a manager and a leader, I've heard that often.
Mm-hmm.
My style of managing may not be the same as a manager that works beside me or that I've worked under, but I tend to stay true to who I am, and I feel that I get more done. I get more encouragement from my team by being who I am and it took a long time to realize that I could do that. It's funny because, and not to sound cliche, but as a result of my education at this school, I feel like I'm in a better position, a stronger position to say, okay, well, this is what I'll do and this is what I won't do. And one thing I won't do is not be who I am. I need to be who I am. I need to manage the way that I can manage. I'm not, a clone. And if I'm too nice, so be it. I'm too nice, but I will get what I need to get done. And as long as I have my vision, my company's vision in the forefront, I'm going to do it the way that I see fit. Keep it in mind that I need to get what I need to get done, but I think people are afraid, and they're afraid of, and that fear keeps them stagnant. They don't want to move because they're afraid of, am I going to lose my job? The big thing now is, everybody needs a job, as I do, but you need to be who you are, and I think that if you are, you'll be more respected, that you take a stance for who you are.
I think that's so true. It's so important to overcome that fear in order to advance in your career. I agree. So let me turn to you, Regina, and ask, the topic of this session is leveraging your own personal identity to launch and advance in your professional career. What's one thing that you think made you special, that made you stand out at the beginning of your career?
Well, I think that first of all, I will agree with the ladies over there. It's not only them, but as a master's program students, that first differentiate you, that you're trying to achieve something. You not just sit and click buttons for sometimes I talk with people who stay at one job for 30-40 years, and I wonder how, like not moving the same position and everything.
Well, things are
So
changing
this-
so much nowadays too,
Yeah,
that very few
yeah,
people have
it's-
the opportunity. to do
It's
that.
unbelievable, and actually now that I'm working, why I moved in my career, because I wanted to move into the state jobs or federal jobs. Didn't happen for me, maybe because of my accent.
But do you think maybe your accent, or I'm thinking of my parents, do you think that made
Yeah.
that helped make you stand out?
I honestly think, we live in a very diversified country, which, amazing, especially if I compare it to my country, or a lot of countries around the world. But, I think still there is a kind of stereotypes, and, I know that I was actually interviewed for a state auditor for the state, and there was like 400 something candidates, and I went to the top 3, which I thought was great. But if you have a person who probably native speaker not, it's just but who knows, I'm not gonna judge that, but anyways, I was able to land a job I'm working now in non-profit sector. And it's amazing how different it is from, like, let's say banking, where I always was, So it's very, very different. And in nonprofit sector, you see so many people who just stuck in their own ways, and they just don't want to change. And me being in pretty much high up position, it's so hard to try to move people forward. So
Do you think having the experience that you had before is actually, maybe it's helping your new colleagues?
Definitely.
Helping
because-
move them
Yes,
forward?
because obviously, once you work in banking, private banking, in the private sector, it's totally different, technology-wise, career-wise, business-wise.
Well, because,
everything.
you work in, the medical field is such a complicated field in so many ways.
It's very, very complicated, and but you'll be surprised how, my company is 500 employees. They're still, maintaining it as there are 5 employees,
Right.
back in the day. So when I came in on board, I did so many changes that now they're just, but it's an interesting field.
Right.
That's a great position to be in, because you have this space to improve things.
Excuse me, how did
Yeah.
you make the transition from banking to a nonprofit?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Good question.
Well, as I mentioned, I was trying to get into the state job, so federal job, but it didn't happen. So I thought my second choice was nonprofit sector. And once I was interviewed for different kinds of position in the field, I really liked the medical field, because that was something new, absolutely, totally different, new from what I was doing before. And once I spoke to CEO, he told me all the history of the center and how it was opened, and it's really a great feeling of working for a community. Just personally for me, because it's not just you working for a board of directors who, looking for profit and everything. It's different animal, but it's interesting when you bring a difference to the community, because we have a lots of events, we're doing different, we have always different meetings and
Right, right.
networking.
I bet you get a lot more fulfillment out of
Right,
what you do
absolutely.
now.
So that just brings you something, you know, something on other level than, you know, you just get your bills paid.
But I see partly, I understand what you're saying, that people are stuck in the same job. For example, I've been stuck in my job for 8 years now, and I've been trying to look for other positions, but if you go too different, then they're gonna ask you, okay, they're gonna tell you don't have enough experience in that field, as to what you were saying earlier. And it's true, you can't necessarily say that you have the experience, but out of all the things that you've done, you can pick little things here and there that actually could definitely help you in the new thing you're doing. What was your story? How did you make that transition from
I
between
think,
two different things?
well, first of all, when I was interviewing, I think my first strategy, so in 2012, I got my, you know, master's degree, and they decided, that's it, I just want to move. Because I was in a private bank for 5 years, there was no opportunity to really movement. And said, okay, I want to move. And what I was doing, first of all, I was applying. I had non-stop interviews, so you just do a lot of applying to different jobs. And once you go on different interviews, you seeing what they, you know, employers what they are looking for. And I think for me, when I went on the interviews, and you know, I don't want to brag or anything, but you know, I got so from every interview I went to, I got an offer. Why? Because I think it's a very distinguished quality of people that the employers, they see that you are really a go-getter. So I think that's a very important quality to have. And once you go on the master's program, you get it. Because if you would be a person who would sit just you by sitting you here, you already do, you know, a step forward. Because people who just sit at their jobs for, you know, 30, 40 years, they don't even know.
I totally agree.
It's
and
interesting that you're saying that, because we both come. I'm from Romania.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we both,
Well, and having that level of confidence is so important, right? You know, I was
Right.
mentioning before that my parents are from Taiwan, and you know what makes my father distinctive in job interviews is the fact that he's very confident, and so he's had people criticize him for his language skills and his way of speaking, but he's very confident, and that's how he's landed the positions that he has. And now I'll toss it over to you, Wes, and been sitting there patiently. So what's one thing that you think made you special, that made you stand out at the beginning of your career, and how did you use it to help launch your career?
Yeah, I don't know if there's much that made me stand out. I think the trait about myself that helped was that I was, and still am, self-critical, and not in a negative way, but just I kind of had a good sense of what I was good at and what I wasn't good
But
at.
that can be a great characteristic in the compliance field.
Well, and I think in any field. And so I'm good with numbers, I'm good with analysis, I actually also write well, and so those are kind of like two strengths that I have, but I was terrified to speak publicly. Just, you know, in front of a committee meeting, just terrified. And so I just forced myself to do it and to look like an idiot and be an idiot. And as time went on, it was less idiotic, but I got better at it. But it's one of the things I think I have a good sense of what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I try to leverage every opportunity I get, those things that I'm good at, and I always try to not only work on those things I don't think I'm that good at, but I also want people to know that I'm working on those things that I'm not quite that good at, and also get their help and support to the extent that they can give it to me. So a little different take on it. I don't think there's anything special about me that made me stand out, other than the fact, the go-getter. You know, I always need a challenge, and it's a personal thing for me. I really don't care about how it relates to the company as a whole. It's very intrinsic. I want a challenge in front of me, and I want to try and achieve it. And I think that kind of attitude is kind of, to your point, on the go-getter kind of stuff.
So I'm just going to ask one more question, and maybe I'll go down this way, and then I'll open it up to the whole audience. And one of the as we were talking about this particular evening, one of the types of questions that we wanted to ask was a question related to diversity and inclusion, which is a priority nowadays at many places of employment. And my question is, do you foresee that diversity and inclusion will continue to be important, and how do you think it will continue to evolve? Because it's not something that has remained static over time, of course. Diversity, inclusion. Well, first of all, the term inclusion is now much more in vogue than it was, let's say, even 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, definitely. So I guess I want to ask that question, and then we can go on down the line. I'll ask you first, Kristen.
Okay. Well, I think diversity and inclusion is paramount, very important to any organization or company. I foresee, inclusion, continuing to grow across all fields and be present. It's not there fully in a lot of places. I'm just going to speak from my personal experience and perspective. I know there are a lot of perspectives out there, but the one I know best is my own. So as a white female, I would like to see equal pay and things of that nature. More women on boards, more women in top positions in banking and in law and policy and in basically every field. I'm all about equality, so I think it's very important. But my perspective and my experience so far has been that it is increasing and people are working for that. We still have a long way to go until we're there, but I think it's really important. I've felt like NECB has been very inclusive and very supportive when I was a student here. So I always felt like that was a priority for the university and for the program that I was in. I also felt like they were really good at seeing that as a working professional, people were coming from different backgrounds and had different job situations going on. I don't know about my colleagues here, but I was working full-time while doing the degree, and I think there are a lot of students who do that. And my professors, came into the course or the class knowing that. And were
certainly
very,
in NECB, that's very much the norm.
yeah, and I really appreciated that. I felt like they were, professors and staff at NECB were very aware of the nature of people's background and wanting to be inclusive of everybody.
That's great. Sharlene.
So just to backtrack for a minute and make a comment about what was said, I thought that I was the greatest writer until I started my doctorate program and I received my first assignment back. Not such a great writer. Yeah.
You said, okay, so I could be
yeah.
wrong. In my
Lots of yellow on my paper. But my professor at my school now they're very supportive. I think in general the society now wants to help individuals be the best that they can be. Not to sound idiotic about it, but it's true. If they see that you have a drive and that you have a personal motivation and you are looking for more fulfillment in your roles, whether it's personally or professionally, I think that there's a lot of support out there, but it's finding the support. As far as diversity and inclusion, I'm a type A personality and I like to prepare for everything. So as I started to read the questions that Roger sent me, I wrote down, highlighted everything, that's just me. But I spoke to family members, and I have an uncle that is in the IT field, and he works down here. I won't say where he works, but as I explained to him the subject for tonight, he says, oh yeah, innovation and diversity is big. It's big nowadays. That's what everybody's talking about, and he's older. So his take on it and my take on it may be a little bit different, but I see that it's going to be continuing to grow. Companies are looking for talent. They're looking for individuality. They're looking for that special thing that stands out, because companies are competing with each other. So I see that they're going to look for, there's a lot of people that graduate with their masters, there's a lot of people that graduate with their bachelors, but what makes you special? And I thought that this was a great subject. I came late into the game of trying to get involved into this discussion, but I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have, because whenever I see people, I always say, okay, well, have you thought about getting your master's? Because it's important. You need to grow. You need to let people know what you're about, because it's going to be immensely important going forward.
If I may, where does outsourcing play into that? Because my personal example, I finished my master's at NCB, and I went to a few interviews after that, and they looked at my resume and they said, wow, you do so many things. You're going to get bored. Literally, that was the answer. And this wasn't just one interview, there were quite a few of them.
I got that as well. While I went through some transitions while I was in school here, and I got laid off from a position that I had at a small credit union, and devastated me because I liked what I did. But you know what? Everything happens for a reason, and there's something great out there for you. Just don't give up, and don't feel that you're less wary of it. Just keep going. I would reach out to headhunters, to different associations that will spread your resume out for you, and network your resume for you. But there's a reason why you haven't got what you want yet. I think you should just keep trying and trying and trying.
That's
and
so
trying.
true.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Roger, if I can ask a question, just
Oh,
to follow
go
up on
ahead,
that, because I think what Denisa said is interesting, and I almost hear it in some of the things you all say, that how have you dealt with that? I imagine everybody up there has that personality that I get bored easily. I can't imagine finishing a degree here, going on for a doctorate, starting multiple different careers within an industry, coming in from, a country where you speak nothing, and walking in and asking for a job without being the kind of person who needs the next thing. So how do you deal with that in an interview, or when somebody, do you play that up, do you talk about it, or do you play it down? And try not to intimidate the people that you're talking to.
That's a great question.
Interested in hearing about how you
I think it
guys handle it.
depends. Again, I think it goes to the idea that if they're looking for somebody who's a specialist, then you need to try and
Try it back.
convince them that that's what you're a specialist in. I think that's probably more the norm these days than people looking for generalists. I could be wrong, but maybe I shouldn't say. I was going to say, I'm getting to that point where I'm getting a little bored in my job.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, so you become a specialist, but you said you're looking for that next challenge. It's not really about the company, it's about what you want. So how do you take that and make that into something for you?
It's interesting how things have changed, because the bank I work for is not a typical bank. It's a government-sponsored enterprise. It's a wholesale bank, a bank for banks.
Yeah.
And there's actually corporate social responsibility kind of built into what it does. It has to, by law, contribute 10% of its earnings to affordable housing and
Sure.
community development. It's kind of neat to be working for an organization like that,
Yeah.
that actually gives back, even though it has to.
Is it the industry that you find a little boring, or the position?
Oh, the position.
So
I'm
just curious about that.
One thing I wanted to add is, you may go into an interview with the expectation, okay, I read this job description and this is what I want. But what I found from personal experience, that happened to me, but I went and the first thing they said was, you're too overqualified for this. So I sold myself, and they said, well, hey, we have this position. Is it something that you might be interested in? And, take this job description and let me know what you think. So, the ball is in my court now, and I went for that position with it was a call center. I've been in banking since 1986, and I've never ever dealt with a call center. I'm used to the face-to-face dealing with customers, but it was a very good experience. It went into a virtual banking sector. I learned a great deal from it, but then I got kind of bored because it wasn't, I wasn't given the leeway to do what I felt I could do. I felt that I was basically being a teller, and I've done my time as a teller. I don't want to be a teller anymore. So I, again, outsourced, and I looked for different opportunities, and a company came up, and I said, well, this is a small company. I don't know about this, but they offered me something that, wow. And I surprised myself, because the recruiter that was outsourcing my resume said to me, well, hey, Sharlene, this position's available. What do you think? And I said, well, one branch, I don't know. She says, but there's a possibility for growth. They're looking to open branches. And I really love where I am right now, because my direct supervisor says, Sharlene, this is what we need. This is a vision. You tell me how you want to do this. And that's personally, that's what I like. That's what I've been looking for. You know, an opportunity to shine, and it didn't happen right away.
I think my dilemma is that I love the company. As you said, State Street is just as involved in the community. That's like the new thing nowadays. Talk about inclusion. They're very inclusion. They even have an inclusion office, actually, and a citizenship and inclusion office. So that part of that, because it gives me the part that I like, which is volunteering and coordinating volunteers. That part keeps me there, but the actual job that I do sucks.
If I can add
Is that a Romanian term? Or?
No, that's very American actually. I learned it in US. I can show you that.
If I can add a couple comments on the inclusion and diversity thing. So
Yes.
I think it's definitely going to become a bigger deal. And for a couple reasons. One, it's in business's best interest. And so I look at myself and say the last thing I want are a bunch of people who think just like me. I want people who are going to think different than me. And I think, you know, to get that, you have to expand your horizons culturally and bring in different people with different backgrounds. The other thing is I think the younger generation, and I look at my kids as the generation, they're actually spending their money buying services and products with companies that think like they do. And they're, you know, you look what happened with Chick-fil-A and their desire to come into Boston, and this is like they were kicked out because, not the company itself, but
yeah.
because of the CEO is really not supportive of LGBT initiatives. And I think, I look at my kids who are very open to all these things and very supportive of it. They're going to put their money where their mouth is, and if companies don't follow that, they're going to fall.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a great thing.
That market tells a business what to do instead of
Absolutely, I think it's a great thing.
It's so interesting because I was just talking with a friend about, you know, for those of you into corporate social responsibility, stakeholder theory versus shareholder theory. And obviously, if you're into shareholder or stockholder theories, you think that shareholders or stockholders are the primary, if not only, parties that matter. But when you think about stakeholder theories, you think about employees and customers and even the community at large. So it's a very interesting.
And I never heard of those concepts until I went to NCB. And I totally support it. And actually, that's where I'd kind of like my career to go.
Excellent.
With firms that believe in the concepts of corporate social responsibility,
Right,
inclusion
right.
and diversion,
Right.
or inclusion and diversity.
Right. Regina, I'll let you
Yeah.
into that conversation.
Well, right now I'm working for probably one of the most diversified organizations, because we are just oriented on, you know, Latin community, African American community. This is the main focus of, you know, serving. But I just want to talk a little bit about your interviews, how you went, and, you know, I think it's a lot of times I hear on interviews also, oh, you know, you might get bored, you know, you this and this. What I answer to this is that it's not that I, you know, get bored on the job that I'm doing right now, but I just, you know, I just want to move forward. Or I want to gain an experience. I wouldn't call it, you know, I'm bored, you know, especially, you know, like right now.
You misunderstood me. I didn't. I wasn't even telling them that I was bored in this position. They were telling me that I would be bored in the position I was applying
Right,
for.
but that's what I'm saying. Like if they tell you that, it's like you can say that it's you just want to take a new challenge. It's not like you get bored. Because I think with every job experience, you gaining something. You gaining, you know, some different new things. You work in different teams, and I think for us, like the management position, it's very important quality that you have to. They have to see that you can be a manager, because this is not that easy. I used to work. You know, I used to be a financial analyst where I didn't manage people, and now I do. And
That's
it's,
a good point, yeah.
you know, it's not every person can do that.
It's a hard challenge to overcome when somebody
Right.
suggests you're overqualified or that you may get bored, and it's something you need to be prepared for, and how you're going to respond to that. But I think it's somewhat a reflection of the labor market in that there's many more candidates than there are positions, and these are ways companies go about weeding out people so they just kind of use these. I don't want to call them necessarily excuses, but if you've got the choice between somebody who is overqualified and somebody who's perfectly qualified, well, you're going to take the person who's perfectly qualified, because the overqualified, I think you can legitimately say there's a risk that they won't last that long, that they'll get bored, they'll think they're underutilized, and they'll leave. Whether legitimately or not, I don't know, but it's a challenge, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the state of the labor market, and employers can be very choosy.
I just want to speak to Wes's point and Dr. Catalano's earlier question. I think there's not necessarily anything wrong with being bored in your position sometimes. We're often very quick to think that the grass is greener on the other side, right? And we want a new job, or we want a new angle on something. And it's okay to be bored sometimes in your job. And I think the key is, in one way, allowing yourself to be bored and asking why you're feeling that way. And also the relationships that you have with people in your company or organization are so valuable, because sometimes it's not necessarily about leaving the company and getting a new job, but rather, you know, what's a new project you can take on, or possibly even a new title or promotion within the company. But the job market is hard, you know, it's not always easy to find a new job, so leaving a company just because you're bored in the moment isn't always the best choice, although sometimes it's right.
Well, I think that's a very good point, and I would add that, you know, working with customers, or working with clients, or working with partners, or networking with individuals in the same industry is just as important as working with your colleagues, right? Because that may be where the next opportunity lies as well, whether it's a new position or simply something that you're interested and passionate about.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Kristen, I really want to commend you on bringing up the equal pay, because I've actually, that's part of the things I've dealt with at my company, which is a big company. And it so happens that there are quite a few women in leadership positions there. But you still see that discrepancy up to the highest levels. At the bottom, I have quite a few friends that have left because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought proof forward that as women they were paid less, at one point 25% less than their equal counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this as the new big thing. And Hillary Clinton was here actually at the mass conference for women, and she actually touched on the subject as well. I don't know if you were there.
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I did hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah, she did an amazing job at that conference, and one of the subjects that
I agree, and that's such an important issue, I think, at both the federal level and the state level.
Yeah.
And in many cases, litigated about it, because I think that's so essential. Michelle, I know that.
I just had a question.
Yeah, go ahead. ask
So
it.
I actually was reading an article. It just came up, popped up on my emails. And it happened to have been one that said that, okay, networking. People, they did a huge study, number of studies, pulled it all together. People hate networking. Absolutely, professional networking. People don't like it. They said they feel dirty after having done it. They think it's distasteful. So when we come back to this issue, clearly about being you, and when we think about disliking networking, I was wondering how you guys got around with that. I mean, not everyone is born extroverted or really can go into a room and start shaking hands. So I was wondering how you guys dealt with that and overcome maybe the fact that you don't feel comfortable doing that, because apparently there's a good percentage of population that doesn't. Some of you might be in that group. So how do you handle that?
I'll go. I'm pretty bad at it. I'm good at establishing relationships to the extent that they're part of work. And so if I need help or the support from somebody, I'm great at establishing a relationship. I'm horrible at maintaining them. And I'm also horrible at establishing relationships that don't relate to work. What's the point? And so back on the whole self-critical thing, that's something that I recognize. That's something I've done absolutely nothing about. So I've done nothing to improve on that part of but it's really important. And so after the mortgage meltdown, I actually lost my job and was unemployed for a year. And the absence of that kind of networking became really clear to me. And so I guess I'd encourage any of you who are contemplating career advancement that establish and maintain as many relationships as you can, because you never know how they might be useful in the future.
Do you think you're bad at networking, or you're just very selective?
That's a nice way of putting it, I guess.
I'd say select.
I do think that's a good point that you raised, though. I think networking comes in different forms for different people. Some people will have a smaller group of, colleagues or people in their industry that they network with, and other people cast a wider net. And one thing I think to your specific question, that is, there are so many different forms of networking now that you can probably find one avenue that you're more comfortable with. So, there are a lot of events where you get to meet people in person that you can find in any industry, in any city. So if you're a people person and you want to shake hands and see their face or whatever, you can find that. If you'd rather sort of stay at home and network, there's LinkedIn. There's so many ways to connect with people digitally and virtually, and not necessarily have to brave the traffic like I did to get here.
And LinkedIn has definitely changed so much.
Yeah, it has.
Everything
So I think, you can breathe a deep breath and know that there are a lot of different ways to make connections, and you can probably find one that suits your personality type.
Just to add, I don't have a problem networking. I like speaking and meeting people and learning what people are about. But I have a few mentors that are really good at networking, and I'll sit and talk to them about what makes them more comfortable in different situations. I'll also look online and because there's so much information out there, I'll Google, what makes a good networker, and write a tip down and try it. And one thing that I'm big on is I set my own personal goal, because I can go into I'll look at meetup.com and go to an event, but I'll set a personal goal for myself, and I learned this through work when I was forced to do it. Bring 3 business cards back with you type of thing. But I'll set a personal goal for myself and say, okay, well, I, Sharlene, want to be able to come back and say, okay, 3 things that I learned about 3 different people, and have their email address and say, okay, well, it was nice to meet you. One thing from the conversation that I had, and you never know. You never know if you're gonna need to reach out to them and say, we met at XYZ function, and this is what I'm interested in, and if you ever hear of anything that you think I might be interested in, you never know. A lot of times people make connections that go far from who they met at an event. So it may not be easy all the time, but if you're afraid of it, or if you don't like it, just face it heads on and say, okay, I'm gonna walk in there, I'm gonna put this face on, and I'm gonna talk to people.
It's about making the time to do that too, probably, because, I mean, nowadays, I think time is one of the most valuable things.
Yeah.
Should probably be the most expensive thing too.
So I know we got started a little later, but I think we have time for one more question, and I wanted to come for the audience. I know that I've seen some scribbling. Oh, go ahead, sir.
My name is Johannes. I'm not from NECB, but from Berkeley College. I did business before in Europe and then changed to music. And I want to start my own business, and I have a question to you. Did you ever consider starting your own business and becoming an entrepreneur yourself?
Every day.
And what stops you?
And what type of business, too? I'm curious.
Tell us more.
Tell us.
We could invest.
I've thought about consulting for small business. I've thought about some kind of restaurant. My wife's a really good cook, and the rest of her family. And
Don't do it.
I have two kids are cooks, and so we thought it could be a family thing. I'm risk averse. I'm a wimp. It's a risky endeavor, and I just can't. I can't pull the trigger on it.
I couldn't be the devil's advocate, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I like alternative perspectives.
And I know that the restaurant business, no matter how good the cook is, it's a really tough
Sure.
business to break in.
What about the rest of you? And Kristen, you haven't ever thought of opening your own business?
I started a nonprofit after college, so
Okay.
I did co-found a 501c3 educational nonprofit, and it was very hard, and it was a lot of work for a little payoff. The little payoff that came felt really good because we were helping children and working with children in schools, but the amount of time and energy, because I did it while still working full-time, was a lot of work and really stressful. So, I want to be upfront with you about that. It was hard.
Which experience would you say was harder, running for city councilor or?
Running for city council was even harder, but even more rewarding and such a wonderful experience. I would not take it back for anything. And that was entrepreneurial in itself, having a campaign and
Yeah, you're
there's a
selling
lot of
yourself.
finance that goes with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the product.
How did that come about?
It's been a lifelong dream to run for office, and the timing was right, and I had a lot of support behind me, people in the city who wanted me to run, and friends and family who were willing to step forward for me as well. And just trying to be really brave, even though I felt scared sometimes. So
You have a wonderful website.
oh, thank you.
So
Yeah,
it's
it is
all
nice.
about, when you think about an entrepreneur and starting your own business, the whole social media thing is really changing the way you communicate your business. And I just thought your website, communicating yourself, running for that position was really so nicely done.
Well, and I think the point about overcoming fear is so important if you're thinking about starting your own business. At one point in time, I thought about starting my own law firm, and I think like you, I didn't feel like I could actually muster up that courage to make that leap because, and I think one of the fears to overcome is this fear of the unknown and fear that you can't do it all because I think there are a lot of complexities involved in starting a business, but I think at least where I've gotten stuck is thinking about those complexities, right? Thinking about the risks and the issues that may arise. I mean, obviously in the banking and finance field, there are a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurship, but at the same time, it's also a field like the law where there are a lot of major players, and so you also have to be realistic and weigh what the opportunities are there.
Regina, what about you? Did you ever think about?
Well, I think like Kristen said, once she went with, she had a lot of backup support and family. In my case, it's not, I mean, my family is not here. So for me, you know, I think stability is number one. I'd rather, even though maybe, yes, I want to open a business, but you have to always have a backup plan. You know, we all have rents and mortgages. You know, it's not like you can say, but besides that fact, I think for me, I'm better in company, you know, atmosphere and somebody actually to structure you versus me structuring myself. I mean, I know that once I work remotely, I found a lot of more things to do. Yeah, so I guess it also depends on personality.
Yeah.
And it does. So,
Yeah.
who asked the question?
Me.
So, are you looking about music? Doing
Music and management consulting, combining those two areas.
So, I'm married to a musician
Yeah.
who is an entrepreneur. But there have been times where his business, he didn't make enough money in the business to carry payroll. So he didn't take a paycheck. But he was married to a woman that had a job, thank goodness, and health care. I think it was a real struggle for him prior to getting married because of the health care issue, not being able to really do that. And in the ups and downs, when you run your own business, there, you know, it's not every 2 weeks your paycheck is coming in. There are times when money is flush, and there are times when money isn't. So getting good at managing through that and being realistic about it, that you will have ups and downs, is really important.
Make sure you get
he
her
could not,
information.
he could not work, his personality, he could not work in a typical business. He's a musician and he's a free spirit, and he comes and goes, and he was an hour late for our wedding, just to give you a sense for his appreciation for time. He was on a different plane. But he's been obviously successful enough to be happy. And in the end, that's what it's all about, right? So I think he made a good decision for him. But you do have to reach deep inside and think through some of those practical things, like health insurance. So marry the right person.
Yeah, the moral to this story.
90% of your happiness comes from
Sharlene, how about you? Starting out business?
I, just like my counterparts here, I do think of it, and I think I dabbled a little bit on getting a certificate and becoming a life coach, and I kind of do that on a volunteer basis. The people that I deal with at Interfaith Social Services and United Way, Interfaith Social Services, when I was out of a job, I couldn't sit at home and not do anything, so I volunteered at the labor department in Quincy, where I helped people with their resume, which helped me spruce mine up, and I got involved with their program where they helped women move from a transitional time from interviewing, dressing for jobs, what role playing for interviewing, that sort of thing. And that's what I'm passionate about. Would I leave my job to start a business of that sort now? No. But will I continue to do it on a volunteer basis and get insight as to the ups and downs of it? Yes. So maybe one day, I'm not going to say that I won't, but realistically, I know I need to keep my job. But you know, there are individuals that have come to me and said, you know, Sharlene, can you write a bio for me? And you know, I don't charge them, but they, you know, pay for supplies, they pay for printing, that sort of thing, so that I can build up my resume and a portfolio to say, okay, well, now is the time maybe that if I find a rich man, that I can start my own business.
I don't mean the right man.
Yes. So, yes, I think about it as well. But I want it to be something that I'm passionate, just like you say, music. I want it to be something that's gonna collaborate and work well for me.
So I see that it's close to 7. I want to thank everyone for their patience, but I want to thank most of all our panelists. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you so much, everyone.
Hold on, there's the surprise aspect, because now there's the practical part. Since we have so many qualified people here, we're going to start our own business.
That would be nice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.